I should have known something was off. The second Mr. Harrison ordered his steak, practically still alive, and asked the server if the kitchen staff understood what a Caesar salad was. That was just the beginning. The main event, my public dismissal, unfolded at our quarterly marketing gala. A bizarre display of forced smiles, overcooked salmon, and half the content team pretending to admire a man who once declared, "Creativity is for kindergartners and TikTok fads." Mr. Harrison, already 4 bourbons deep, his face flushed with arrogance, clinked his glass. The sound echoed, too loud, silencing the room. Forks froze midair. His eyes locked onto me, like a predator who just noticed his prey wasn't applauding enthusiastically enough. "Let's discuss dead weight," he slurred, a grotesque grin twisting his lips. "Let's talk about what happens when someone believes silence equals brilliance." It took me a moment, a slow-motion second. I thought perhaps he was lambasting the new social media manager. Poor guy had submitted a request labeled "help" in all caps. No. His pudgy finger rose like a cursed scepter and pointed directly at me. "Rose here thinks she's more insightful than the rest of us. She sits in meetings, meticulously taking notes like a damn historian, and yet, somehow, we're still missing our Q3 targets. Curious, isn't it?" Nervous, pitying laughter rippled through the room. A few colleagues furtively glanced at their wine glasses, as if chugging fast enough could teleport them out of this corporate nightmare. I sat there, frozen in my elegant blue dress, the one I only wore twice a year to feign sophistication. My untouched appetizer sat before me, my hands clasped tightly in my lap like a frightened child. "You're let go, Rose," he spat casually, slicing into his steak as if this were just another item on his executive checklist. "Effective immediately. It will collect your laptop. Desserts are on me, everyone." Silence. I didn't move. I couldn't. Rage buzzed in my temples, but humiliation pinned my spine to the banquet chair. I wasn't just fired. I was unceremoniously annihilated in front of clients, colleagues, the event staff, and 3 influencers posing with their artisanal cocktails. Then, like a glitch in the Matrix, a voice from the next table. "Well, that was quite a performance." I turned my head slowly, unsure if I still possessed the ability. The woman seated there was effortlessly chic in a minimalist charcoal suit, a sleek bob, and delicate pearl earrings that hinted at quiet wealth. She didn't look at me. She looked at him, Mr. Harrison, with a kind of detached curiosity usually reserved for observing peculiar insects. "Excuse me?" he barked. She sipped her champagne, unwavering. I said, "That was quite a performance. I operate a company too. I generally prefer to handle terminations privately, but perhaps that's just my antiquated approach." I felt the entire table, the entire room, lean in, like a live studio audience sensing a new act. "Who even are you?" Mr. Harrison snarled, his cheeks now a violent shade of crimson. She retrieved a business card from her purse without breaking eye contact, reached across, and placed it on my bread plate, neatly beside my untouched butter knife. "We appreciate individuals like you," she said softly, her eyes finally meeting mine. "Tomorrow, 9:00 a.m. Don't be late." She rose, adjusted her blazer, and exited without so much as a backward glance. Mr. Harrison gaped, like a man struck by an apparition. The server arrived with creme brulee that nobody touched. I sat there for another full minute, just breathing, just trying to process how I'd gone from human dartboard to, what, a lifeline, a setup, a cruel joke? I left before they brought the bill, walking out into the crisp night air, past the hum of distant city sounds, the card still warm in my hand. 9 a.m. tomorrow. Maybe it was a hoax, maybe a pity interview, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible. The building looked like it had been lifted straight from a modern art exhibition. Sleek glass panels, sharp angles, an abstract sculpture in the lobby that resembled a deconstructed saxophone. It smelled of lavender and innovation. I stood there in last season's heels, clutching my handbag like a survival kit, wondering if I was about to be recruited or ensnared by tech vampires. The receptionist didn't react when I stated my name, simply nodded, handed me a sophisticated black guest badge with a QR code, and said, 17th floor, Miss Caldwell is expecting you. As if I wasn't the woman who had been publicly dismantled 12 hours earlier. The elevator ride was silent, pristine, too rapid. I half expected hidden cameras or a trap door. These were the rivals, the ones we'd disparaged on company chat, the ones Mr. Harrison swore were merely glorified graphic designers with venture capital fever. The 17th floor door opened with a soft whoosh. I stepped into a minimalist space that somehow smelled even more opulent. No cubicles, just glass, light, and the hushed clicks of mechanical keyboards operated by people who looked well-rested and didn't weep in parking garages. Then came the voice. Rose, calm, assured, a little too perceptive. I turned. Clarissa Caldwell, CEO, a titan in the business press. The kind of woman who made words like game changer sound like a precise surgical instrument. Her presence felt like a refreshing blast of cold air, wrapped in silk. Come, she said. No handshake, no smile, just the same steady gaze she'd used to dismantle Mr. Harrison at dinner. I followed her down a corridor, lined with whiteboards filled with complex, color-coded flowcharts I vaguely recognized. We entered a small conference room, a single window, one table, one chair. She remained standing. I'm going to be direct, she stated. We know who you are. We've been monitoring your contributions for months. You're the one who conceptualized the Everest project, aren't you? I blinked. That was a discarded concept. No one outside our team had even seen the complete specification. We saw it. She tapped a tablet. The screen illuminated, displaying wireframes I hadn't seen since last autumn. My notes, my layouts, my very own handwritten margin notes, even the doodle of a coffee cup in the corner that I'd sketch when bored in meetings. My stomach churned. Your former company utilizes outdated security on their shared drives. One of our junior analysts, a former employee of your team actually, caught a glimpse when someone linked a file in a team chat. Amateur hour, but fortunate for us. She leaned closer. You were on to something. They buried it. I sat down heavily. The chair creaked beneath me, as if it, too, was uncertain of the nature of this meeting. Why are you showing me this? I asked. If you already have the files, what do you need me for? Clarissa's eyes narrowed, not unkindly, just clinically. Because data is data, but insight, that's harder to replicate. You envisioned something your superiors were too oblivious or arrogant to pursue, and you weren't mistaken. We've been developing a parallel version of Everest for 6 months, but it's lacking a certain soul. You are that soul. A pause. She let the words sink in, like a surgeon allowing anesthesia to take effect. You want me to help you complete it? I asked. I want you to own a portion of it. Refine what we haven't perfected. Bring your vision back to life. She tapped the tablet again, cycling through screens I'd imagined but never built. You've already accomplished more than half the conceptual work. Now, you just need to help us execute. I should have been flattered. I should have leaped at the opportunity. My mind was still trapped in paranoia mode. And what do you gain? Besides a low-cost hire and a trophy from poaching Mr. Harrison's discards? Clarissa actually smiled the first time. I get to launch the product he was too foolish to comprehend, and I get to do it with the woman he publicly humiliated. You don't need to admire me, Rose. Just construct what you initiated. Prove him wrong. I stared at the screen, my old design breathing back at me like a comatose patient awakening. I felt something in my chest fracture open, not relief, not triumph, something far more potent. Momentum. Clarissa extended her hand at last. Are you in? I took it, Not because I trusted her, but because I trusted what I had created, and because nothing would taste sweeter than proving that arrogant, self-important tyrant wrong. The first week was quiet, in a way that felt suspicious. I'd stumbled into someone else's covert operation, and no one had figured out how to politely inquire why I was still standing there. Clarissa had placed me in a glass-walled alcove near the end of the development corridor, nestled between a UX team that communicated in whispered design discussions and a back-end engineer who hummed classical hymns under his breath. No orientation, no fanfare, just a company laptop, system access, and an unstated agreement. Don't speak, just work. I kept my head down, arriving early, leaving late, praying that no one would delve too deeply into my professional history or notice the nervous tremor in my fingers when I typed too quickly. Clarissa hadn't paraded me around. If anything, she was treating me like a loaded weapon. Useful, but best kept holstered unless absolutely necessary. Day 3, I was exploring their internal architecture wiki, attempting to reverse engineer how they'd integrated their back-end API calls when I discovered it. A folder buried deep in the planning drive, labeled Project Alpha Archive, deprecated. I almost didn't click. That name, Alpha, it could have been anything. But I clicked, and then I stared. Inside were dozens of documents, versioned PDFs, design mock-ups. Some were Clarissa's, some were the engineers, and then there were mine. Not copies, replicas. Paragraphs I'd written late at night with an empty wine glass and a pounding headache. UX notes I'd color-coded in my own peculiar system. Blue for requires development input, yellow for ask marketing, red for Mr. Harrison won't approve. They were all there. I froze, my heart pounding. They hadn't just glanced at my prototype, they had reconstructed it, diagram by diagram, bullet by bullet. Someone had taken what I'd built in silence, archived in a drive no one at my old job ever looked at again, and treated it like sacred text. A voice behind me nearly made me drop the laptop. "What are you looking at?" It was Liam, one of the junior product managers, sharp as a tack and always wearing t-shirts from obscure indie bands. He was sipping a green smoothie that looked like regret. "Just catching up on the archive," I muttered, closing the folder like it was illicit material and I'd been caught at work. He raised an eyebrow but didn't pry. "Be careful digging around in there. Some of those files are radioactive. Half the team argues about who wrote what." "Total chaos last spring." I nodded, my throat dry. When he left, I reopened one file. Everest Early Vision Draft. The document had been stripped of my name, but the content, line for line, it was me. The central philosophy, the user journey, even the absurd metaphor I'd pitched to Mr. Harrison about building trust like a digital handshake. He'd rolled his eyes at that. Clarissa's team had underlined it. My head was spinning. I wasn't angry, not truly, but unease crept in like dampness in drywall. Someone here had known about me long before Clarissa placed her card on my plate. Who and why hadn't they reached out sooner? I began compiling a mental list. Names, timelines, potential leaks. Anyone from my old team who might have moved on? Anyone I vaguely remembered from shared chat channels. The strangest part? There was no fingerprint, nothing in the metadata, no username tags, no email threads. Whoever had fed my forgotten files into this machine had done it cleanly, surgically. Which meant this wasn't a last-minute rescue. It had been planned. By whom? Clarissa, perhaps, but she didn't strike me as someone who operated in the shadows. Someone else in this company had taken my ideas buried and ridiculed, and nurtured them back to life in secret. I stared at my reflection in the laptop screen. I wasn't just here by chance. I was here because someone had made room for me, and that scared me more than being fired ever did. The cease and desist arrived in the middle of a sprint planning meeting. Clarissa was demonstrating a revised user onboarding flow. I was 3 sips deep into a lukewarm coffee when my phone buzzed with an email. The subject line was so preposterous, I actually snorted. Immediate legal action. Intellectual theft by former employee Rose Miller. Sender. A personal Gmail address. The .commander. Legal. At gmail.com. I kid you not. The PDF attachment was worse. 3 pages, unformatted, with capitalized sections that defied grammatical sense, like a deranged rant. You are hereby notified that your actions constitute corporate espionage and physical theft of conceptual assets. Yes, physical, my new favorite word. He called me a traitor of the worst kind and compared me, direct quote, to a termite in the foundation of innovation. Clarissa read the entire thing once, sighed like she was reviewing a toddler's manifesto, and slid it back across the table. Do we need to respond? My colleague David asked, his pulse quickening. No, she said flatly. He's using a free email account. It's not even registered to a firm. This isn't law. It's a tantrum in PDF form. But that didn't halt the spiral. Over the next 2 days, I watched it unfold in real time. First, he updated his LinkedIn status. Some individuals will betray everything for a paycheck. Be cautious who you trust in your strategic discussions. No names, just implied accusations. Then came the messages. Not to me, no, that would necessitate courage, but to people I'd worked with years ago. Former coworkers, college acquaintances, even an ex-boyfriend's sister who messaged me, confused, asking if I was all right. He was contacting them directly, alleging I had stolen trade secrets, that I was under investigation, that I was a liability and being watched. Watched by whom? The IRS? A secret society of venture capitalists? Clarissa's PR team flagged the behavior, but I still couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake at 2 a.m. rereading that email, my stomach clenching. I imagined him pacing around his lavish condo, shirtless, sweating, dictating furious voice notes to an AI, as if it owed him royalties. This was more than ego. It was war, and I had become the enemy in his crumbling world. By Thursday, I'd stopped checking my inbox before noon, just to delay the daily circus. Clarissa didn't flinch. She leaned in. Let him flounder, she said over lunch. He's making a spectacle of himself. We remain quiet. We build. But I wasn't quiet. Not internally. I started documenting everything. Every message, every connection he tried to sabotage. I screenshotted the cease and desist and had it framed, half as a joke. But the truth was, I needed the reminder. Not of fear, but of why I left. Because for all his bravado, he hadn't built a single meaningful thing in over a year. His empire was ego, spreadsheets, and buzzwords no one used outside social media feeds. We were constructing something tangible now, and he sensed it. That's why he was afraid. That's why he was lashing out like a cornered animal. And that's when I stopped being afraid, because I realized if he was on the warpath, then I must have been worth battling against. The story emerged over expensive scotch, not in a bar. Clarissa doesn't do bars, but in her office, after 9 p.m., blinds drawn, city lights blurring through frosted glass like phantom traffic. I'd stopped by to drop off some revised feature notes, but she waved me in and poured 2 fingers into a cut glass tumbler like it was second nature. No pleasantries, no preamble. Did you ever wonder why I was seated at that table the night he fired you? She asked, swirling the amber liquid. I shrugged, unsure where the conversational traps lay. Coincidence? Her smile was a grim twist. Nothing in this industry is coincidence, least of all proximity to Mr. Harrison. That's when she told me. 10 years ago, she'd worked for him, back when he still used his actual name, Robert, before the rebrand, before the startup millions, before the designer suits and podcast appearances where he spoke in metaphors about disrupting the very fabric of digital interaction. He'd hired her as a lead project manager. She'd laid the groundwork of his first major product, scaled it from concept to demo in 4 months flat. And when investors appeared, he pushed her off the stage, claimed full credit, then fired her 3 weeks later in front of the board for strategic misalignment. Her version of public disgrace had occurred in a sterile office over lukewarm coffee and stale pastries, but the humiliation had been just as acute. "What did you do?" I asked, stunned. "I left. Changed sectors. Waited," she said. "Let him gain notoriety. Let him forget I existed." And then she built her own team, quietly, efficiently. People like her, undervalued, over-delivering, tired of being dismissed in meetings by men who wore branded hoodies. "He doesn't grasp longevity," she said. "He plays for applause. I play for after the house lights go out." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about me. It never had been. I wasn't a random hire. I was the next strategic move. The next morning, a company-wide email announced my new title: Director of Product Strategy. Not consultant, not contractor, director. Clarissa didn't even look up when I entered her office, just slid a folder across the desk with the subject line Everest Core Module, Miller Protocol. I opened it. Inside were all the schematics I'd built over the past 2 weeks, interwoven with the original notes from my prototype. But now it was ours. Streamlined, sharpened, breathing with fresh architecture. My name wasn't just in the metadata. It was in the system's naming convention. They'd named the core engine after me. Clarissa finally looked up. "You're not a rescue mission. You're a scalpel." Something in my chest burned. Not anger, not pride. Something older, like I was finally permitted to matter. I started leading sprint calls, reviewing design branches, approving feature locks. People stopped second-guessing me. I wasn't the girl from the restaurant anymore. I was the woman who built the foundation they'd been fleshing out all year. And as our product neared its alpha launch, I realized something else. We weren't just developing software. We were constructing a monument to his downfall. Every button click, every API hook, every use case scenario I approved was another nail in the coffin of his legacy. And unlike him, I didn't require applause. I just needed it to function. The conference room smelled of anxious perspiration and too much dry cleaning. 12 investors, one long mahogany table, a pitch deck filled with everything we'd meticulously concealed for 9 months. I stood at the front, my palms cool only because I'd chilled them in the break room freezer 5 minutes earlier. Clarissa gave me a nod, not encouragement, permission. This was the first time she wasn't the one presenting the slides. The room dimmed. I clicked the remote. I became the voice of the endeavor we'd poured our souls into. Every word was muscle memory. Feature highlights, market gap analysis, a real-time product walkthrough, a competitive analysis, gentle but pointed. I didn't utter Mr. Harrison's name, but I didn't need to. The investors knew. We all knew. The skeleton of my old prototype had grown teeth, and it was now consuming everything in its path. When I concluded, the room was silent. Then, one of the partners, a man with silver hair and a designer vest, who probably owned 3 yachts, leaned forward. "Who spearheaded the architectural pivot on the second module?" I hesitated. Clarissa answered for me. Rose did all of it. 12 heads turned to me, 12 silent acknowledgments. By the end of the Q&A, I felt buoyant, not giddy, but ready. Like I'd just landed a plane with smoke in the engine and still managed a perfect landing. I shook hands, I smiled. I thought it was over. It wasn't. That night, someone texted me a Twitter link with no comment, just the link. I clicked and froze. Our slide deck, pages 6 through 10, cropped slightly, blurred, but unmistakably ours. Diagrams, interface mock-ups, Clarissa's notes in the margin, uploaded by an anonymous account named @InnovateOrPerish with 3 followers. I didn't even have time to fully process it before another notification hit my LinkedIn. Mr. Harrison had posted, When you dedicate your life to building ideas, expect predators to circle. But to witness them steal your hard work and parade it as innovation? That's not disruption, it's deceit. Some of us still uphold principles. The comment section was a wildfire, people tagging me, tagging Clarissa, the old team. Online forums erupted overnight. Did Rose Miller steal her ex-boss's code? Tech whistleblower or opportunist exposed? I couldn't breathe. Clarissa called 10 minutes later. "We're on it," she said. "Legal has already drafted the takedown request. I'm tracing the IP on the leak, and no, this doesn't impact the funding round. The investors already emailed. They're on our side." "But it's out there," I whispered. "He's out there. He's crumbling," she said, calm as ever. "That post? That's not a blow. It's a desperate flail." I wanted to believe her, but every time I refreshed my name on search engines, the dread climbed higher in my throat. I didn't sleep, didn't eat. Every sound, every notification made me jump. I kept expecting someone from legal to say, "We've had to halt the launch," or "You've become a liability." But no one did. Instead, Clarissa forwarded me a one-line email the next morning from our lead investor. "Tell Rose she absolutely nailed it. Let's get her on the next board call." I stared at it, my heart still pounding. I was now the face, which meant I was the target. So, I stopped hiding. I contacted the PR team, rewrote my professional bio. I recorded a polished voiceover for our product teaser. I scheduled podcast interviews. I reshaped my LinkedIn profile and made peace with the fact that the launch spotlight wasn't moving off me. It was burning through me. Fine, let it burn. I'd rather be on fire than fade back into obscurity. It was 8:43 p.m. when I received the chat message from Deep Roots. "Hey, can I tell you something off the record?" Daniel, a junior developer, always nervous, coded like a prodigy, but blinked like a hostage in every stand-up. We barely exchanged more than a few words beyond hi and merge conflict. "Sure," I replied. "I think someone's feeding info to your old boss." I stared at the screen, my pulse starting to tap out Morse code against my ribs. "Why do you think that?" "I saw someone clone one of your branches onto a USB, not from the main repository, but locally, like they were being sneaky." And then that same afternoon, Mr. Harrison posted a social media update with a very specific comment about our onboarding flow. It hadn't even been deployed yet. I read it twice, then a third time. My mouth tasted like copper. "Who was it?" Daniel didn't answer for a minute. "Not naming names, just watch your back." I logged off the chat, sat in the dark for 15 minutes. Then I opened my laptop again. If someone was leaking our work, and not just leaking, but weaponizing it, it meant they weren't just trying to sabotage us. They were trying to hurt me. I wasn't going to confront them, not yet. That's what he would expect. That's what he would do. Instead, I got surgical. I created a new branch off our main repository and labeled it innocuously Session Token Opt Patch. Something no one would look twice at. Inside, I crafted a completely fabricated log entry. It described a hypothetical vulnerability, something juicy and technical. Session tokens briefly stored in local cache during failed login loop. Risk of exposure under rare conditions. Environment, QA replicator. I even added faux commentary to mimic natural developer chatter. A to-do tag, a commented out fix. Then I made the commit public, briefly, just long enough for someone watching me or watching the repository to notice. And I waited. 4 days later, at 11:17 a.m., Mr. Harrison posted a LinkedIn update. When you disregard security protocols, you risk exposing user data in token environments. Some innovators cut corners, the astute ones audit properly. No one outside our development circle would have understood the language, but I did, and so did Clarissa. I printed the commit log, highlighted the bait, walked into her office, and dropped it on her desk. Her eyes scanned it, slow and steady. Then she smirked. He took it. Hook, line, and flaming dumpster, I said. She nodded. Good. Quietly push out a real update this afternoon. In the meantime, legal will enjoy this. But I wasn't finished. I made another commit, this time to the genuine build, and in the comments, I added a single line. / patched Harrison gate leak vector. Thanks for QA, Robert. Petty, perhaps, but I'd earned it. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was dictating the pace. Let him dance to my rhythm for once. Let him rant in his rented office, screaming at some poor intern about token breaches that never existed. I didn't have to shout anymore. He was screaming into a storm I had designed. It transpired at the Industry Expo, the major one, the kind where every booth smelled of sponsored coffee and desperation, the kind with CEOs pacing in circles, praying their wireless demos wouldn't crash mid-sentence. We were scheduled to present on day 2. Clarissa would open, I would demo, then we'd participate in a panel with 3 other startups to discuss ethical innovation in a post-AI world, which was rich. Considering half the attendees probably sold their user data before breakfast, everything was proceeding smoothly for about 20 minutes. Then he walked in. No badge, no lanyard, just a navy blazer that still had the sleeve tag attached, and a white t-shirt that read, Ideas plus Execution in blocky lettering. Robert, Mr. Harrison, the failed guru of enterprise solutions. I spotted him from across the expo floor like a shark fin cutting through a sea of interns and wide-eyed hopefuls. His eyes locked on the stage, on me. Clarissa saw him too. She didn't flinch, just adjusted her microphone and leaned forward as if about to narrate a crime scene. The moderator was halfway through a question about user-centric design when Robert marched right up to the front row. "Excuse me," he blared like he was hailing a taxi. "I'd like to address the panel." The panel froze. The moderator stammered, I'm sorry, this is a closed session." He cut her off. "This woman," he pointed at Clarissa, "has built her entire platform on stolen material. And her," he pointed at me, "she was terminated for misconduct and walked out with proprietary intellectual property." A hush fell. Phones appeared. People started recording. Clarissa's smile was surgical. "Hello, Robert. You can't conceal the truth," he snapped, stepping closer. "That product is mine. The core of it. You've merely disguised it with a new interface. But it's my code. My schema." That's when I stood up, not hastily, not flustered, but calmly, as if I'd been anticipating this exact cue. I walked to the edge of the stage, my heels clicking against the riser, and handed the moderator a slim folder. Inside, a chain of time-stamped emails, drafts of my original Everest prototype, dated design files, notes, and at the very top, the cease and desist he'd sent me from a Gmail account, riddled with misspellings and paranoia. I leaned into the microphone. This is a documented chain of authorship dating back 26 months. The core architecture was shelved by Robert himself, then left to languish in an unprotected team drive. The moderator flipped through the folder, visibly stunned. "I've been accused of theft," I continued, "but what's more probable? That I stole a forgotten prototype from a man who never implemented it? Or that I resurrected my own work after being silenced by someone who confused leadership with shouting?" Gasps. A few muffled laughs. Cameras everywhere. Robert opened his mouth again, probably to spew another buzzword-laden tirade, but Clarissa interjected, her voice velvet-wrapped steel. "This expo is for creators, not burnt-out figureheads seeking relevance." Security intervened then, not roughly, but firmly. Robert didn't resist. He just stared at me as if I were a hallucination he couldn't debug. I met his gaze. No rage, no smugness, just silence. You buried me, I thought. I blossomed anyway. He was escorted out. The moderator cleared her throat. Well, she said, smiling nervously. That was certainly unexpected. Clarissa picked up the microphone again, calm as still water. Innovation isn't solely about ideas. It's about who can carry them through adversity. The room erupted, and just like that, the narrative flipped. By dawn, my name was on 3 tech blogs, an online Q&A request, and a social media video edited with dramatic music under the title, She Shut Him Down in Heels. The headlines weren't kind to him. Tech tyrant implodes at rival's launch, from visionary to villain. The fall of Robert Harrison. How one woman outsmarted Silicon Valley's loudest failure. That last one made me laugh, not because it was inaccurate, but because I didn't outsmart him. I simply outlasted him. By noon, 3 of his largest investors had withdrawn. A leaked burner email showed Robert begging one of them for media spin budget. It got forwarded. It got posted. It got turned into memes. By evening, Clarissa called a quiet meeting, just me, her, and a closed door. She poured 2 glasses of something dark and aged, handed me one, and said, "If you ever want to lead your own team, you let me know." I just nodded, not because I had an immediate answer, but because I had finally earned the right not to have one yet. I stayed late that night, not to work, just to sit, to breathe, inside a space that didn't shrink when I raised my voice. No one breathing down my neck, no fake compliments, no red-faced outbursts about metrics, no executive dressed in designer casual wear. Just my screen, my cursor, my rhythm. At 2:01 a.m., I opened my phone, scrolled down to blocked contacts. There it was. His number, still in my recent calls like a forgotten stain. He'd called during the expo, twice. I hadn't answered either time. My thumb hovered over it, and for a second, I remembered every moment I'd sat across from him in meetings while he took credit for my work. Every time he called me soft-spoken like it was a flaw. Every eye roll, every smirk. Every time he called me kiddo. I blocked the number, just like that. Not out of rage, not revenge, just release. Then, I stepped out of the building. The city was quiet, still damp from an earlier rain. No cameras, no applause, just the soft hum of distant traffic and the visible warmth of my own breath in the cold air. I didn't smile, didn't cry. I just stood there for a moment, whole. No fireworks, no parade, just me and peace. This story teaches us that true strength lies not in outward displays of power or ego, but in quiet resilience, unwavering dedication, and the courage to reclaim what is rightfully yours. When faced with adversity and unfairness, maintaining integrity and focusing on building something of value will ultimately lead to triumph over those who seek to tear you down. The most profound revenge is often a life well lived, a career well built, and a sense of inner peace that no amount of public humiliation can diminish. Believe in your worth, cultivate your skills, and let your work speak for itself. Success will follow, and your spirit will remain unbroken.